It's working.
I see it.
Yep, there we go.
Okay.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us, everybody who's watching. Today, we have a really interesting conversation with Jason from Jalopnik. Thank you so much, Jason, for coming here and speaking in front of, a potentially hostile audience.
Yeah,
and defending one of your recent articles on AI Day.
Yeah, I appreciate your having me. I think I know going into here is a bit of a lion's den, and that's okay. I understand that. But I think talking about this is a good thing in general.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening, and there's so much to actually talk about. And I feel like on Twitter and other places, and when I write, we get, things get condensed down to very firm ideas when they go on Twitter. And I feel like reality is a lot messier and a lot different. And talking, I think, has got to be the only way we can figure this stuff out. So, look, I've already been called many names. I know there's a lot of people who think the whole goal of this should be to make me look like a drooling simpleton, which is well within my comfort zone. I've been that a lot. So, yeah, it's fine. I think it'll be good, and I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely think it's good to talk, face to face, where there's more nuance than Twitter. And, realize that we may have disagreements, but at the end of the day, we're all human beings. If we met each other in real life, we wouldn't hate each other because we had a different opinion. We'd be able to, have a beer, hang out, talk. Yeah. We all love cars. And, this is a really important public discussion to have. So, we're going into it with that in mind. But, just to start, I have to ask you because, it seems like from the perspective of a lot of Tesla customers, you kind of heard even just announcing that we were going to have this talk, a little bit of the back and forth there is kind of like this animosity where, Tesla customers, they love their EVs, their Teslas.
Sure.
And, they feel like Jalopnik is kind of, writing these unfair articles about Tesla. And it seems like on the other side, some of the people at Jalopnik are kind of like, man, these crazy Tesla people, like, they're totally nuts. So, how do you feel about Tesla? What would you say to, like, if somebody said, Jalopnik's totally biased against Tesla, what's up?
Okay, so first, as far as how I feel about Tesla, I don't hate Tesla at all. I think they've done a lot of amazing things. They genuinely have made electric cars a relevant, powerful force in the modern times. There's no question about that. None at all. I think the fundamental design of the cars is good. I think the packaging is fantastic. I think there's a lot of great things about what Tesla does. But I'm not. Okay, my personal theory on how to feel about cars and car companies has always been you love the car and not the company. I'm an old air-cooled VW guy from way back. I have an old, like a 73 Beetle I still have. That was always my love. But I am not a Volkswagen stan or whatever. That would be crazy. I don't understand. I would never tie my identity or worth or anything to a company because a company is about making money and that's it. And the more you dig into the history, they're always going to let you down. Volkswagen especially, you do any digging into their history and it's
right.
Big trouble. And then there's Dieselgate recently. So don't do that. And when it comes to cars, I love that there's so many people passionate about a given car. I think that's fantastic. Blind following of a company, I think is problematic, and I feel like I do see that in a lot of the fan base of Tesla. And it's not like that hasn't been around before. Like there have been,
right.
People wearing the rather push a Chevy than drive a Ford hats, and this has been part of car culture forever. What's happening now with Tesla is a little more intense, I think, than we've previously seen, and I think there's a lot of complicated reasons for that. But as far as I'm concerned, Tesla is fine. I don't have a problem with them as a company. I am very willing to critique things about Tesla I don't like. And that's what you should do to any company. And I write about Tesla a lot, partially because they do interesting things. Tesla makes a lot of noise. They're doing interesting things. Everybody knows this. That's why there's so many people so in love with the company, because they are doing good things. And of course that means people are going to read about it. And of course I want to write things that people read about. If I have a problem with some of the things, I write about it. And I think that's fine. But I think if you actually read what I've been writing about Tesla, a lot of the problems are less Tesla specific and more general to the whole idea of how we are approaching autonomy in general. And some of it's Tesla specific, but I think most of it actually isn't. Or the stuff that concerns me the most is more industry wide in some ways. And as far as Jalopnik itself, we have no policy about anti or pro Tesla at all. It's every writer writes what they want to write about, and our whole site is about writers' opinions. We're not a straightforward news site. If a writer has a beef with a particular car company and they write about it, as long as they're not lying about anything, as long as they can back up what they say with real facts, we give a damn about that. If we make a mistake, we want to correct that kind of, we want to correct mistakes. So as long as they do that, if they have an opinion, then they have an opinion, and that's how the world is. And you're not always going to like it, but whatever. Sometimes you will.
Yeah, so, I think that's fair to some extent. You have to have people criticizing things, looking at things critically. Reading this article you wrote about AI Day, it almost seems like, there's also some comedic value, like, you're really trying to be funny and entertain. Like, I was laughing a few times reading this article, but, it's just so funny to me. There's obviously a lot of Tesla owners who just got their first EV, a Tesla, and they're really blown away. They think it's their best car they've ever driven. But, then I read this article and you're basically, your premise of the article was that autopilot and FSD, as they're working on it, is a waste of time. That we shouldn't be working on supervised systems at all. Or do you want to clarify what exactly your thesis was with that article?
You're not entirely off. I have a problem. Level 2 is what I have a problem with. I do not like level 2 systems. I think they are inherently problematic, not because of the tech. And I get a lot of pushback on this. People tell me Tesla's tech is advanced, it can handle it. That's not the problem. It's a conceptual problem. It's the way it's handled. I think inherently the way level 2 is implemented is not really compatible with how human beings work. And I think that's a problem. That's my primary issue. And I think, I'm happy to talk about that because it's been known for a while, and I think the reason I say that they're wasting time with level 2, and to some degree, level 5 as a goal, I also don't think makes a lot of sense, because one of the biggest arguments is we have to get to these levels to save lives. Okay, it's going to save people's lives, but the thing is, if our goal is to save lives immediately, like right now, there are so many things we could be doing. If we really wanted to save lives, we would have driver training like they have in Finland, and we'd have vehicle inspections like they have in Germany. We'd have mandatory breathalyzers on cars. We'd have mandatory 5-point safety harnesses. We'd have, more rigorous speed limits. If that was really what we wanted, if saving lives was the absolute goal, we don't have to wait for autonomy to save lives. We just have to decide it's a priority, and there's things we're willing to give up to do it. A breathalyzer in every car means, some people are going to have issues with that from various freedom perspectives, but it would stop a lot of drunk driving. We can make it so cell phones fundamentally did not work when they're in cars. There's ways we could make that happen. So there's a lot of things we could do that don't have anything to do with autonomy, and yet I hear a lot from people who got very, very interested in the idea of saving lives in traffic when that meant owning a really cool premium electric car with a charismatic company leader. So so that's the cynical part, because if it's all about saving lives, level 5 was going to take a while, and we should start thinking, well, what can we do before we get there that will actually have a better result? I don't think level 2 is that result, but I do think there are some interesting options that we could do, if you'd like to hear about them.
Right. I think really it's kind of a fallacy of an argument. Nobody's saying that we shouldn't do all those other things that can improve safety too, but there are real people who are using autopilot today. I've been using the FSD beta that works on city streets for the last year now. And, so I've had a car that's been able to do entire drives automated in some cases. Granted, it doesn't work every time, but in many cases, I can turn it on and it can take me to my destination without me ever turning it off. And there's really millions of people using these kinds of systems, not just Tesla Autopilot, but systems like, Ford Copilot, Cadillac Super Cruise,
and all these different systems. I have a problem with all the level 2 systems. It's not just Tesla.
Well, I mean, I think there are millions of people who are using these systems and loving it. Like, I'm a huge fan of this. I think it's made me a lot safer. I think, it's potentially a lifesaver for someone like me who is, driving like an asshole all the time. It's a huge, huge difference, and a huge safety enhancement, and also a huge convenience enhancement. Like, we just took autopilot across the country.
Right.
2,700 miles. So that would have been incredibly boring without autopilot. So how can you tell the millions of people who are using these level 2 systems?
How did autopilot make it less boring for you?
Well, it eliminates the fatigue of having to manually adjust the controls. I didn't even necessarily have to think about where we were going. What's the next freeway exit? Okay, do I need to get around this truck? It did the whole thing. It went around cars. It took the freeway exits. It stopped when we needed to charge. It made the whole journey just a lot easier for me. How can you say that's a bad thing? And
well, here's the problem. I mean, it's extremely impressive, and I understand that it would be, more relaxing, but at the same time, it kind of is a bad thing, because inherently, the reason you felt more relaxed is because you were paying a little bit less attention than you normally have to when you drive. And in a system like autopilot, where it could disengage at any moment, you don't know when it might, that's a problem. I mean, if you think about it, there's an analogy for what it's like in the human driving world. If you're epileptic, for example, you can only get a license if you've proven you have not had a seizure for a solid year in most states. It varies 6 months to a year in various states, but that's always the criteria. Autopilot isn't that different. It can be a great driver until that moment it isn't, and you're there ready to take over. And but the very nature of a level 2 system, in fact, the paradox of it is Tesla's got arguably the best level 2 system right now, but the paradox is that actually makes it worse, because the more the system does, the less engaged the driver is, and you're in this gray zone of driving and not driving that I just don't think is a good place for people to drive, because you're not really driving. And we've known this since 1948. There's the Mackworth study of vigilance. Like, we've known it. In fact, an MIT study just on the 20th of September came out showcasing how much more inattentive drivers are when they're on autopilot. And it's not saying that you're doing a bad thing, and I totally understand why you would like it, but the way humans work, if the system's doing most of the work, we're going to be paying less attention, and in a level 2 system that has no warning or no provision for a decent failover if it can't get your attention in time, that's just not a great way to do it.
Well, Jason, I think this is a point that a lot of people have made, but it's vastly overblown. In these 2,700 miles that we drove, we counted the disengagements, and there were about 16 disengagements.
Okay.
And in every case, the driver was able to take over and respond in time, and the car made it safely across the country without any accident.
Just fantastic.
So, on top of that, Tesla's now started doing these cabin camera features where they use the camera in the car to do kind of a basic driver monitoring.
Right.
And, if you pull out your phone or you're not looking, they'll beep at you and they'll say, hey, pay attention. And so, I think this whole idea that people aren't going to pay attention is, vastly overblown. People already aren't paying attention, driving manually on their phones.
That's not good either. I mean, none of that's good.
Right.
But people are using the level 2 systems out there. We've seen many examples of this. There's the dude in the back seat. There's the blatant ones, but it does happen a lot. I mean, it's not.
I wouldn't say it happens. The vast majority of people, I think, they want to use it safely. They don't want to die.
Of course they don't.
They know, they understand what it is. They've had to disengage many times. The vast majority of people want to use it safely. Now, are there going to be a small number of people who are well publicized on the internet or whatever who abuse it? Yes, but, you can put there's a lot of measures in place. They're going to continue to put more. And ultimately, it's kind of a transitory thing, right? Like, I think there's kind of this utopia fallacy where we compare, level 5 to level 2. But the thing is, we don't have level 5. No. So it's kind of a false comparison, right?
Well, not really. So it's not necessarily a false comparison, because we know, the levels of autonomy, of course, they often get misunderstood as to refer to like levels of quality of how well it works, which is not the case at all. All the levels refer to is the interaction between the driver and the machine. Okay, so like in level 2, you have to be monitoring it the entire time. Level 3 is a shit show of confusion where it's sort of, there's times you don't have to be, but then it may call your attention. Level 4, of course, you don't have to pay any attention in geofenced areas, and level 5 is the magic, go anywhere like a human. So it's not like it's not really a fallacy, like a utopian thing. Like, it's not necessarily comparing level 2 and level 5, because I just don't think level 2 makes any sense at all. And I think there's a way level 2 can work. And I think the way level 2 works is if we inverse the way it works. So if we're using level 2 for safety, if that's the goal, if the goal is to keep people safe, then the way level 2 would work you would be in control, you would be driving. So this car would not do anything without you actively driving. But all of the level 2 hardware, all of that autopilot hardware, it's, the 8 cameras and the convolutional neural nets and the HydroNet backbone and all those things that make it so amazing would be working behind the scenes. And it would be the opposite of the way it is now. When the driver disengages, or when the autopilot realizes you're about to be making a terrible mistake, then it takes over. The guardian angel kind of approach. That would and Tesla could still do all of their shadow monitoring of everything that happens and get all the data they want, but we don't have to worry about driver monitoring anymore, and it's completely for safety. Then it's a backup, and the backup is something that we know will take over when it detects trouble, and that's the computer. Like, all of the issues that we have with humans not taking over, those are not the problem if we reverse the way level 2 is handled. So that level 2 works.
Yeah.
The problem is it's less fun because the car is not doing as much driving, but you have all of the safety advantages. So if it's really about safety, why don't we go there, at least until we figure out how to handle disengagements better, how we're able to handle getting the car out of an active traffic lane, out of trouble when it can no longer, when it has to disengage or it can't get a driver to respond. So what's the problem with that?
Well, Jason, I think that's a great idea, and, I really love that part of the article, and I think it's such a great point, because this is exactly what Tesla's doing. They call it Tesla Active Safety.
Yeah.
So, essentially, the same system that's used to drive the car is also looking after you while you're driving manually. So, for example, because the car knows how to center itself in the lane, it can detect when you're drifting out of the lane.
Right.
So if you're drifting out of your lane and someone's about to hit you, it'll just move the wheel and put you back in your lane. So that's called, lane departure avoidance or emergency lane departure avoidance. So, I think this is like such a great point. It's not just about the convenience feature where it drives itself, but this same engine can be used for active safety. And it can also be used for the visualization. Just the other day, I was walking and I was stopped at I was stopped at a stoplight. And I looked down at the autopilot visualization, and I could see somebody walking from the sidewalk and walking up to their car and getting into their car. It was all shown on the screen because the system was looking around me and distilling that all into this visualization. And as I was looking forward, I had eyes in the back of my head, and I could see.
Yeah.
And there are all these benefits to having the technology in the car today. So, I think the level 2 system is really what's going to become the level 5 system down the line. And we can't get it perfect, but why not ship what we have today? Why not use it for what
in a
we
way
could?
that gets rid of the driver monitoring problem entirely? Like, if Tesla were to, or all of the car makers, if they were to say, let's go to reverse level 2s because it's more important about safety, we get rid of the driver monitoring problem, and what they would be developing during, they deploy that, what should be developed is ways. And this also may not be all entirely in the car. Maybe we'll need infrastructure help. I don't know, because the problem of getting from level 2 to past level 3 and into level 4 is we've got to figure out ways when there's trouble to get the car out of trouble. Like, basically, when the car is confused or the driver's not there, we've got to get it off the road, frankly. And I've done things recently where I test, because I know I found a lot of confusion, people thinking Teslas and actually other cars could pull off the road when there was a disengagement, which so far, nobody does that. Nobody does it. Everybody just slows down and puts their hazard lights on. I talked to Mercedes about this because they were touting a level 3 system, and it seems to just stop in the middle of the road also, which is nobody who's driving on a highway, for example, thinks that's a good idea. If you have trouble, nobody just turns off in an active lane and just puts their hazard lights on because it's a terrible idea. So that needs to be figured out. Like, there's hurdles to get to these points where the driver can truly not pay attention which is what people want after safety. They want to be able to do other things. But to get there, we've got to find a way to get the car out of trouble when it doesn't have to rely on a human driver. And I don't think that's an easy problem. But I do think there's a lot of smart people out there, and it can be solved. But I don't see a lot of effort being put into solving that particular problem.
But Jason, sure, it's not good to stop in the middle of the road, and these systems are still early in very many ways. But,
yep.
You said in your article, this is a waste of time, talent, energy, and money. And you said, that sounds a little harsh. It's not really fair. Now, when you look at data that says a human, while watching autopilot, there's an accident, the car can go 10 times as far on average without an accident. How can you say that that's a waste of time, energy?
I have problems with it. Those are Tesla's numbers. They're mostly highway miles. They're mostly new cars. Because Tesla's, look, they're not that old. It's only been you're only going to have autopilot since, 2014. And you're comparing it against a much...
But you must admit, there's at least a little bit of benefit
I'm not saying
compared to someone driving themselves.
Especially, if someone has a stroke at the wheel, you'd much rather be in a car with autopilot than, the shit boxes I drive. But that doesn't mean... and it's actually that much safer, because there's still problems. You and I both know it still is not good at certain things, still disengages. It's a work in progress. It's a beta. Should that beta just, the people who agree to do the beta test with that, it's fine for them, but there are other cars and other people around them that haven't agreed to it. And I don't know if a public road is the place we want to be testing all of that out. And it's, and I as far as it being so much safer, humans are actually, as much shit as we give humans for being terrible drivers, we're actually pretty good drivers. I mean, humans do a remarkably good job, considering the hardware we were born with, considering we were born to, chase down gazelles and squirrels and lizards and things on the veldt. We're doing pretty well. That doesn't mean that's the best we can do, and that doesn't mean we should be accepting of the deaths we have. The fundamental drive that's going on to some sort of automated driving makes a lot of sense. I'm not against that by any means. But this is the time for us to figure out the right way we want to do it. And right now, I think level 2 is a problem. Inverse level 2 might make sense, and we need to focus on getting out of harm's way. And again, that's a huge problem. I'm not saying it's a simple problem. And it's not a sexy problem. Yeah. That's the other problem.
Yeah, I think this is what the debate is really about fundamentally, is how do we get to autonomy, and what's the best way to get to autonomy? And I think we can all agree that we both would like a perfect self-driving car that can really drive anywhere and not crash into anything. That's what we want. We want it for the safety benefits. We want it for the convenience benefits.
If you're blind,
we're in agreement on that.
Or old, it would be a godsend.
Yeah.
It would be amazing.
Right. But we disagree on how to get there. And you are saying that level 2 is not the way. Now, what I would say to you is, I see level 2 and these systems as the only way to test the software and really make it robust enough to get to level 5.
Why is that?
There's no other way to get there.
Background? If it's monitoring everything and seeing all the inputs and deciding what paths were taken and which were successful, why can't you get good data from that?
Well, I think fundamentally the world is so varied, and this is what you really realize testing the software, right? So, they gave us this software a year ago, and they said, go test it out. And so you turn it on, and, you realize how difficult it actually is to do the right thing. There's so many things that you need to be aware of, and it does incredibly well, but you really realize how tough the problem is. It matters. What are the other people doing? What are the other cars doing? What are the pedestrians doing? What time of day is it? What kind of weather is it?
There's
so many different factors, right? Yeah. And to get it to that level of reliability, I think you really need tons and tons of testing.
Yes.
A level of testing that you can only get from real users relying on it day in and day out and building that level of reliability.
Okay, but consider this. I totally agree. Level 5 and getting to that level is incredibly hard. I don't even know if we realize just how hard it was. And I think part of the reason it's so hard is because fundamentally the way an AI works and a human works is completely different, and the entire system of driving was designed around human beings, and we use a lot more than just rule-following techniques when we drive. We do a lot of these things are actually cultural, like they have to do with being a human being in the world. So, for example, we can tell, like when we're driving and we see people crossing, if someone's got a kid, we immediately know, be on a little bit higher alert. Kids, we know from our human experience, often do crazy shit because they're kids.
Right.
That's what they do. Or you see a weird guy on like a homemade bicycle with a hat with sparks shooting out of it. That's probably not someone I should trust. Or we do things like in a big city like New York, we got people on a crosswalk and you have to get through. There's a weird navigation where you're kind of pushing your way into the crowd, but you're not actually going to hurt anybody, and you're relying on visual associations of behaviors that know people have, or gestures. It's complicated. So an AI system that's watching what the human does is actually going to get more information than it's just the bottom-up rule-following approach. Because we're the arbiters of how the world works, and that's what it should be watching. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be giving up that much. In fact, you might get a richer data set from seeing the often peculiar but functional ways that people behave in a variety of situations. Halloween is a great example. It's almost Halloween now. Like,
right.
Rules change in Halloween. A car driving on Halloween night is going to see things that make no sense to it. You get people in costume.
Exactly.
Yeah, and how is a car going to understand? Cars don't understand. No computer understands the concept of Halloween. But when kids are dressed up as things that don't even look like kids, or they could be cars, like everything, all the rule changes. There's more crowded things going on at night. It's different, and that's a cultural thing. So there's a lot of things like that just aren't strictly rule-based things, and a human is how you're going to learn them. So if there's an AI system monitoring this in the background while we drive, that's good data.
Well, yeah, I agree. It's a really, really difficult problem, and I think you have to admit, we first heard of the Google self-driving car and kind of these modern wave of self-driving car projects around 2009. Yep. It's now been, 12, 13 years, and we haven't really seen a huge launch. I mean, Waymo's running a service in Chandler, Arizona, which I've tried, which is an impressive service. You can take it and it can get you from point A to point B, but they're not in downtown Phoenix, for example.
So they're trying to control the chaos in their area, which is not a bad idea.
But you must admit that, it hasn't really worked out the way that we wanted, and maybe the approach has been wrong. I think that fundamentally there's no way to capture all this weirdness, to test against the millions and millions of scenarios that you have to handle in the real world without actually running on millions of real customer cars and getting the data from the fleet that way.
Well, you would still do it in a reverse L2 system. There's no reason you wouldn't do that. And that very thing you just said, the inherent chaos of the world and all the unpredictability and the huge amount of data you need, that's also why I think level 5 is kind of a boondoggle, because I'm not 100% sure you can ever get enough data to cover everything everywhere. And I think that's okay. I think we just need to pick the places where we want to focus, which is why I think smart level 4 implementation will get us to the goals we want faster than trying to make this level 5 goal happen. Because level 5, you're absolutely right, is absurdly hard. But if we had areas we knew that we could control a little bit, like what Waymo or some of these other guys are doing, where it's more limited, it's less exciting in some ways, but it's going to get the job done. And that's going to be, in America, it's going to be hard, because if it requires infrastructure assistance, that's a hard thing to accomplish. A country like China, where one centralized monolithic government can kind of force changes down to everybody, they may have like a highway system that's got more controls to limit the amount of chaos and entropy in it, so they can have that faster. In America, it may be harder, but it may be the way to get there quicker.
Yeah, and I think that's really the important thing, is how do we get there? Because it's been 12 years, and it's not like, okay, it's been 12 years, but, the next year or two, it looks like it's right there. No, it still feels just as far away as it has been. So, clearly I think we need a different approach. So that's what I really like what Tesla's doing, which is, hey, okay, we can't do level 5 right now. We can't make the perfect system. Let's give you the tools you want as active safety, as you called, kind of the reverse level 2.
Sure.
Let's give them the convenience features, and let's give them the visualization. Let's start using this technology to save lives today, because we don't necessarily know how long level 5 is going to take, but let's put something out and let's keep improving it. I mean, when you hear some of these stories that the Tesla AI team talks about, like, for example, somebody was going to floor it and land in a lake, but the vision system said, hey, that's a lake. Let's not floor it. Someone was going to floor it into a crowd of people. And the system said, hey, let's not floor it into that crowd of people. That technology is saving lives every day today. I don't see how someone can really say, if they're not, besides, just joking, that it's a waste of time. This, I see, is the quickest and most effective path to true autonomy.
I think we're on the same, we actually are on basically the same approach. It's just, I think the path's a little different. Like, okay, so I don't disagree. But I see Tesla's eyes still on level 5 as a goal. And I feel like that's not going to get to where they want to be in time. And I think if they want to make things work better, the first thing they'll do is figure out how to handle real disengagements that don't require a driver's attention. We have to get requiring a driver's attention with no warning out of the loop, because that has been causing problems. Everything else is good. The fundamental technology is strong. Like you said, the emergency, the Guardian Angel reverse level 2 is there. Like, all these things work, but why make level 5 your goal when you can think, first, let's get it out of trouble if it needs to get trouble. Let's solve that problem. Let's get level 4 set up in the places where people want it most. Nasty traffic. You're driving from Irvine to LA on the 5 and 18 miles an hour, stop and go. That should be automated. You should be able to read or let your mind wander there. Long highway trips. Absolutely. That's a good time where people are susceptible to fatigue or, inattention. Let's just take them out of the loop there. And to get there, let's do it by figuring out a way to completely get them out. Let's leave the gray area of level 2, require someone to be ready to go and take over at a moment's notice. Let's take care of that. Let's take care of the driver monitoring problem. Let's solve it by the reverse L2 first, and then figuring out how do we get someone safely out of trouble. And that's the problem we have to solve next. And then we'll get there. But my only difference with what you're saying is, instead of making level 5 the goal, let's figure out viable level 4. And that'll get us there quicker. It'll definitely get us quicker there than level 5.
Yeah, I mean, the SE levels really aren't that meaningful to me. Like, I think you or anyone else from Jalopnik, like, you've got to, if you're ever in California, you have to come see this for yourself, because you really have to see it to believe it. And, this system, like, San Francisco is a shit show. It's just chaos here. It's like, driving here is like running an obstacle course.
Yeah, I've driven in San Francisco plenty. I get it.
Yeah, right. And,
a stick shift, I can even harder.
Yeah, and I can get in my Tesla and I can say, hey, take me to the airport or something like that, and turn the thing on. And in some cases, not every time, sometimes I'll have to take over or do something if I want to make a correction, but sometimes it'll be able to get me there today completely on its own without me giving any manual driving for the entire duration of the trip. Now, it's amazing. In the year that I've used it, they keep making the software better and better. A year ago, it was really bad compared to where it is now. Now it's dramatically better, dramatically smoother. Even people who ride in it tell me that. And I think looking out a few years, it's going to get so good that it'll be way better than a human. I mean, sometimes I'm using it and I'm driving and I'll just see it move over to the left. And I'm like, what's it doing? Why is it moving over to the left? And then I'll see a motorcyclist pass by on my right. And it was actually looking backwards and reacting backwards to what it saw. It's clear to me that, you look at the growth of AI, beating AlphaGo, beating StarCraft, AI just beating all these difficult problems. That's what I think is really the key here. And I think that, within 2 to 5 years, it'll be hard to find a driver that can drive as well as the software. It'll be like a race car driver.
It's impressive that it can drive you to the airport without any intervention, absolutely. And it's impressive that it detected the motorcycle driver. I think humans would do that too. We would hear it and we'd look in our mirror, but it's extremely impressive it just did it. And yet, for all that, if something went wrong, you'd still have to take over at a moment's notice. And if you were lulled because you'd used it so many times and you know it works well, you might not be at full attention. Your hands, of course, are on the wheel because I know you're a rules-following guy who's not looking for trouble, but your mind may still not be there. So why not just solve that problem once and for all? And then you can really enjoy what it's doing completely. Why not? Why wouldn't you want to pressure Tesla to take care of this one crucial part that's really separating this system from being something that's actually genuinely safe without a massive Achilles heel? Like, as someone who loves Tesla, why would you want to put a little pressure on them to do something to make it better in a way that really eliminates the biggest problem that they've had, the biggest conceptual problem? Like, most of the articles about what goes wrong is people abusing the system, if we're honest, or, the system has weird failures sometimes and people take over, and we've seen all the videos of the running into the pedestrians in Seattle or whatever. But really the issue is it shouldn't have to rely on you to take over at a moment's notice. So you could have that experience you've had where it works great with the added comfort of knowing I can just let it do it. I don't have to be there. And again, that's going to take work on everybody's part. If Tesla's going to do it, whatever. Maybe even this needs to be a NHTSA mandate thing that if you have an automated driving system, it has to be able to handle failover in some kind of elegant way that we define. But now's the time to define it, because we're the people it's affecting. This isn't about anti-Tesla or pro-Tesla. This is about people who are driving cars and do things on the road around these cars. This is our time to say, this is the standard we would like. So why not push it?
Yeah.
Why not find a standard we like?
I think you're right. I think that we do want it to be able to disengage safely. There's a long list of improvements that the system could have. It's not the perfect ideal system. It's what we have, right?
Sure.
And that's what I think the key is like reality. Some people say, well, would you like a perfect self-driving car or, an ADAS system that you have to supervise? Obviously, you'd like a perfect self-driving car, but it just doesn't exist in the world. And, we have to take a step. We have to say, okay, there are risks. There are risks that someone could potentially watch a movie or abuse it or not be paying attention at a moment they need to. But there's also benefits. Driving safer, more conservatively, less chance of accidents when used properly. And is it perfect? No. Is it everything we want? No. Should we, push and say that this needs to be better? Yes. But at the same time, perfect is kind of the enemy of good. And I know that's kind of like a hard thing to accept.
That's why I think level 5 is a problem. Because you're absolutely right. Perfect is the enemy of the good. Don't look at level 5. And for what you just said, if the... all of the things you said are it's valid. But why not take out the biggest Achilles heel? Why not work on that problem? And why not make it so we're getting rid of the biggest problem by doing the reverse L2 method? Eventually, we'll get back to the point where you don't have to pay attention and drive. But you already, even with the L2s, if you're using it the way you're supposed to, it's not like you're not paying attention, because you are. You're ready to take over. And that was, my initial thought when I first wrote the article is there was that first video clip they showed of a guy, not driving on autopilot through whatever that city was. And what occurred to me when I was watching that is, it would just almost be easier if the dude just drove. His feet were by the pedal, his hands were on the wheel. In that kind of situation, this is not a long drive. It's not the kind of drive where you're going to get distracted. It's just drive the damn car. You're right there. And what are we really gaining? If you have to pay, have you ever taught anyone how to drive? Have you ever done that? So,
no, not yet.
Okay. I've taught girlfriends how to drive and, things like that. Like a girl I used to date lived in New York, and I remember trying to teach her how to drive from the passenger seat of my Beetle. And you're basically, this is how I feel when I use Tesla Autopilot, or any L2 system, is you're hovering. It's actually more nervy to be watching this thing ready to take over than it is to just drive and use all your inherent muscle memory and things like that. I don't know what we're getting. Like,
right. Well,
what's the advantage?
I mean, Jason, my opinion is obviously different on this. I love using autopilot, and I don't see it as pointless at all. Although this is kind of a common viewpoint, and I've heard, and I think it's funny that you like kind of the reverse level 2, as you call it. Tesla calls it active safety.
Yeah.
These features that work even when you're manually driving, and I agree with you on that. Nobody can disagree that active safety is a good thing. If the car, for example, automatic emergency braking is a feature that's standard on most new cars.
Exactly, and it's
who can say automatic?
Yeah.
Who can say automatic emergency braking is a bad thing? But what I think people don't realize is these really powerful active safety features that are being developed. Like, this is extremely expensive to develop. So they've got clusters of NVIDIA GPUs. They've got people in the Bay Area who are manually labeling, right? Like drawing, this is a stop sign, this is a traffic light. This is painstaking. It costs millions and millions of dollars. And they may not really be able to justify that expense trying to make a profitable electric car, which is already another pain in the ass as it is, without being able to say, hey, we're going to sell this $10,000 full self-driving package, and that'll give you access to all the automation, all the convenience features. People buying that, they're funding the active safety features, the visualization. They're really making all of that possible. And, what is it to you? If some people want to use it, if they want to pay it, if they find some use out of it, then that's great. And it also funds all these great things like the active safety features. I mean, for me, like, it's hard to really understand until you try it. It does seem kind of counterintuitive. Like, the whole point of autonomous cars was supposed to be that we could take a nap or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So what's the point of the system if you still have to watch? And it's kind of a common thing that you hear, but there are actually, like, a lot of benefits, So, just for example, like, okay, I have to put my mask on or take my mask off or something. I can just grab.
While you drive is a common thing.
Oh,
huge thing.
That's huge, right?
Yeah.
Or like, I have to
put your either if you're lucky to have a passenger on the wheel, it's never a good thing, and we've all done it, and it's always a bad idea. But you're right. This is the kind of thing that this system would be good at. And but at the same time, like, as far as like what's it to me if somebody wants to use it, they've agreed to be part of a beta program for unfinished software. I haven't. And the people around them haven't necessarily.
Well, I don't think that you've agreed to have drunk drivers on the road, people smoking crack on the road.
Absolutely.
I heard a story about a kid who drove a car.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's shit all over. I mean, it's not. There's all kinds of terrible.
And this technology could help prevent that one day, right?
Sure,
it could be a backup for all those scenarios. Yeah,
absolutely. That's absolutely true. But at the same time, why introduce another level of potential problems, which is how I see the gray area of driving and not driving in a conventional level 2 system to be. Again, that's where we've had the problems. When people, when the recent, the NHTSA, the thing right now going on with Tesla, which hitting the emergency vehicles, those are not the kind of issues alert drivers have. Alert drivers don't run into emergency vehicles. I mean, unless you're like a sober.
That's not the case. I mean, you've heard of, slow down and move over laws. So, why do they have the slow down and move over laws?
Right. Those are important, but hitting
the reason I think
with lights on is not that's something that humans are very good at doing. And if there's a system and the people who are driving those Teslas on autopilot, if the autopilot didn't see it, there's no good reason why the human in that who's driving there shouldn't have been able to take over. But the reason they couldn't is because of the nature of humanity, right. And that's this thing's doing most of the work. You're not going to pay attention. So why even have that as an issue? Why even introduce any of that as a problem? Why not do it the other way until we get something figured out for that? And again, that something isn't full level 5. That something is everybody agreeing on what a decent way to get out of an active traffic lane when there's trouble. I mean, there's all kinds of, it's not an easy problem, but it's one that needs solving.
Yeah. And, I think that's completely valid in a sense. Like, we don't want any emergency vehicles to be hit. If somebody is responding to an emergency, whether they're a cop or an ambulance or whatever, we don't want to create another emergency by hitting the emergency vehicle. And,
No.
you know, states and the federal government have spent a lot of money advertising these slow down and move over laws, because it is actually more common than you think that these emergency vehicles, maybe they're pulled onto the shoulder, maybe they're sticking out of the shoulder a little bit.
It's a dangerous position.
And somebody hits them. Yeah.
Anything on the shoulder.
You know,
I've changed, fan belts on the shoulder of the road, and it's terrifying. It's awful. So, nobody likes it.
I mean, I think this is kind of a common thing that, you know, there's something that happens, and, you know, it gets blamed as if autopilot, you know, created it. Like, autopilot invented car crashes. Autopilot invented, you know, distracted driving. I mean, in the vast majority of cases, 99% plus, where there was an emergency vehicle, autopilot did not crash into it. But in a very small percentage, and I'll say too many situations where the human and the person didn't pay attention, then there have been like a few collisions. But what did Tesla do? They put out a software update. They started specifically looking at siren and caution lights and slowing down and moving over.
Yeah.
And, you know, their handling of this, I think, is going to get even better and better in the future, to the point where it's way better than a person. So I don't think this actually shows how, you know, people are going to get distracted and they're going to hit it. It actually shows like the strength of ADAS, that you can program it to do the same thing. You don't have to run a multi-million-dollar advertising campaign. You just send out an update, and everybody's cars, maybe even when they're driving manually, it can say, hey, there's an ambulance, slow down and move over. And that's enabled by this technology that you're saying is a waste of time.
Well, I'm not saying all of it's a waste of time. I'm saying the implementation where a human is required to take over with no warning is a waste of time. The fundamental technology, again, we just package it in a different way, can have huge benefits. But I can't get behind any system that requires a human to remain attentive in that vague space where they're both driving and not driving at the same time. We've seen the problems it causes. There's a reason why there's so many, why ADAS systems have gotten so complicated. And, you know, like a torque sensor on the steering wheel is not enough. That's why we've seen driver eye tracking cameras and these kinds of things. These are all attempts to solve a problem that fundamentally we shouldn't even have in the first place, because it's putting humans in a position they're just not good. They're not designed to be in. And we don't have to do it that way. We don't have to go through level 2 to get past it. That's not, there's no reason. Like,
you know, I think this is such a common position you hear from people, and I just think it's so wrong, the idea that, you know, people cannot supervise an ADAS system. I think they can. There's actually an interesting study from IIHS, and they did something really interesting. They did it with a Mercedes C-Class, and it was probably like a Mobileye ADAS or something like that, some kind of generic ADAS.
Right.
And they wanted to study the effect on situational awareness for the ADAS. And what they did was actually a really interesting study design. They took a giant teddy bear and they strapped it to the back of an SUV. And they had people do these drives, and 3 times they had the giant teddy bear pass by the person. And they had 3 cases. They had, you know, people using the ADAS and people not using the ADAS, and then people who were new to the ADAS and who were familiar with it. They were, you know, existing users. And what they found was that for new users, so, you know, they basically asked them, okay, did you see anything unusual on your drive? And they recorded, okay, did they say, oh, well, I saw a teddy bear drive by 3 times, 2 times, 1 time, or they, you know, I didn't see anything strange. And using that as kind of a proxy for situational awareness, they found that new ADAS drivers, people who are just learning to use the ADAS, their situational awareness was a little bit worse than the people driving manually. But the people who were experienced with the ADAS, who knew how to use it, they had statistically significant greater situational awareness compared to the people who were driving manually. They were able to scan their surroundings because they weren't so focused on staying in the lane and see that giant teddy bear. And I think that it increases safety, it decreases accidents, and it actually increases awareness, contrary to what kind of the popular opinion is, that people aren't going to pay attention because they're on ADAS.
I'm not sure I think a giant teddy bear is a reasonable way to measure situational awareness, because it's too novel. The reason people's attention would wander is the exact opposite of seeing a big teddy bear. It's because of boredom. It's because everything is too mundane. A big teddy bear is going to get your attention because unless you're driving in, North Pole in late November, you're probably not going to see a lot of big teddy bears being hauled around on things. So I think that's not finding the problem. Like, the problem is boring ass highways. Like, have you ever driven in through Virginia on 95 where it's just like a corridor of trees? Like, that's the kind of thing that's going to numb you. A giant teddy bear wakes your ass up. So I don't know. I feel like that study feels the opposite of what I would expect. And multiple, I mean, it's not just me.
I think autopilot users will tell you that, yeah, my awareness of what's going on actually is increased when autopilot's handling the basic lane centering. I mean, Jason, how can you say to a million people who use autopilot and who want to use the new FSD beta software that, hey, I don't think this should exist, even though it could decrease the chance of accidents, make you drive more safely, make you drive more conservatively. I don't think you should have this until it's, so perfect it can be driverless, or at least until it can.
Not saying it has to be so perfect. I think we can get the accident stuff out of the way. Has nothing to do with perfection. And I think I'm just asking for one requirement. Because I've been a human being since a child. I know how human beings operate in these situations. There have been many, many studies that have shown this. If something's doing most of the work, we are not going to pay really good attention. We just don't do that. And look, there's like the MIT study that just came out was using a new, it was called Model for Naturalistic Glance Behavior around Tesla autopilot disengagements. So what they were actually doing is tracking how long eyes were watching different things. And when autopilot was active, they were able to track people's attention was not where the eyes would go when you're driving. It was in the center stack for longer periods. It was out the side windows for other periods. I've found myself doing that when I've been driving level 2 systems. And I'm sure there are people who do it well. I don't doubt that you're paying full attention when you're doing it. And I know there are people who are using it the right way. But that takes effort. And it's still, and people are, you have to design things with the understanding that people were not necessarily going to use things the way you want to use it. Technology needs to be forgiving. There's the Q-tip analogy. Like, everybody shoves it in their ear, even though the box says, don't put it in your ear. And, we do things that you're not supposed to do all the time. And our technology, if we're going to implement something to make life better and to save lives, it's got to accommodate how humans are at their worst, generally, like when they're the most shitty. And not unnecessarily in their best behavior, because that's how this has to work. And I think, again, we don't have to get to perfection to make this happen. We could do the reverse L2, or we could put effort into figuring out how to do disengagement well. Again, I see your point. You're not wrong specifically on any of these things, but it's not a matter of not having faith in how humans are. I know them. I love humans. They're some of my favorite people. But I know how we operate, and I know how humans are likely to behave in situations like this. We've definitely seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think you're 100% right. It is predictable abuse, right? It's predictable what humans might want to do. And you've, of course, seen, that guy Lavish P sitting in the back seat. You've seen people record porn on autopilot and, upload that to Pornhubs. You've seen people do all these kinds of things.
If we leave this behind, that will be this. Yeah.
Right. So, it's true, right? And we should always be working to make these systems better and better. But, to me, the checks they've implemented on, the seat belt, the steering wheel, the in-cabin camera, yes, let's make them better. Let's make the driver monitoring better. Let's make it detect sleep and heart attacks and people not paying attention and handle that properly. Let's push it forward. But, to me, when I kind of look at the scale of, okay, here's all the good, here's all the safety benefits, here's all the convenience benefits, and here's all the bad, the scale is way much more on the good for me. Do you feel differently on how those scales weigh for you?
I think there's potential. I mean, I don't disagree. I think there's potential for lots of good, but I also don't see the problem with, let's make them work a little bit. Let's make them do this the way that is as good as we can do it right now, given the current state of technology. And there's a lot we can do. We don't have to be at level 5 to vastly improve how these systems work. We simply don't have to.
Right.
And
right.
What's the harm? These are smart people over there at Tesla. You know, if enough people were like, this is the way we feel it would be safer, they could solve this. They could figure this out.
Yeah.
I mean, no one's doubting that. So why not? Like, why settle for something with such a big potential? And, you know, the potential for people to abuse this, the fact that people were selling like those autopilot buddies, you can still buy them on eBay. Those little things that clip in the window. People are actively monetizing this bad behavior. That's how it's big enough that somebody saw the potential to make money at it. And I know they've tried to put those things down over and over, and they keep popping up. So it's not like it's not there. So, but why even fight against that? Accept who humans are, as shitty and beautiful and ridiculous as they can be. Just accept who we are, and let's make a system that's forgiving of the parts of humans that we're not so proud of, but in the end makes us safer, because nobody wants to see anybody die in car crashes.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's kind of the bottom line. It is kind of crazy when you think about, 1.3 million people dying around the world every year. And this is what I like about autopilot so much is, they're just using cameras, which is seen as crazy throughout so much of the industry. But this is really a system that, if you can get it to work, can be deployed everywhere. And I think that's really key.
They should have systems to clean those cameras, though, at least. Like, I live south, and driving through the summer at night, like, you get so many, you'll go through swarms of, like, gnats and mosquitoes that cake on things. It would be very easy to cause a disengagement from bird shit or stuff flying at you or weather stuff. So they should have... Like, if you're going to have if it's going to be camera-based, you better damn well keep the cameras clean, which shouldn't be hard.
I think they're working on some kind of lasers or something, but I will tell you that I drove across the South, for 2,700 miles, and we got all kinds of bugs on our windshield.
Yeah.
That is the argument for why let people use this today, instead of keeping it behind the lab. You see the bugs, all the different species of all the different seasons. Mm-hmm. You see the rain, you see the weather. Everything the real world has to throw at you,
right.
You see it when you have real customers using it. And that's why it was able to handle the bugs and everything. And it never disengaged once due to, the windshield being too messy. At the end there, the windshield was pretty foggy, but, it got through it. It got through, the whole 2,700 miles without any kind of the system having to turn off. So, I think this is a really key thing.
Through that whole period?
Yep. So about, 170 miles or so. So, it's not great. Like, obviously, I mean, it could be a lot better. I would love to see someone make it across the country.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's pretty incredible. Like, more than 99% of the driving, it did it. So, I think we're in a good place. And, I think you're completely right, saying humans are going to be humans. We need to know how to handle them. We need to be able to manage this. We need to handle the predictable abuse that's going to happen and make sure the systems are really strong there. And not only from a technical perspective, but maybe even from a legal perspective, right?
Yeah, sure.
But fundamentally for me, I think the technology is just getting better so fast that within 2, 3, maybe 5 years at most, this won't be a question that anyone really has, because the systems are very rarely going to mess up, especially within their kind of high traffic areas that they travel every day.
So why not push for actual, failover, actual forgiving disengagement that doesn't require the driver to take over? Why not push for that? If we're talking it's going to be so much more improved in 2 or 3 years out, why shouldn't that be a key part of what improves in these next 2 or 3 years? Like, why not? Because then you actually could read or do whatever you want, while you were in it. Like, why not hold Tesla's feet to the fire a little bit to make that a priority?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that should be what we're going for. It should be that the system is able to detect when a disengagement's needed and handle it really gracefully, rather than the human having to kind of watch and do it themselves and be ready to take over, and the system kind of not knowing. I think you're definitely right. That's kind of the direction we want it to be going. But, there's a lot of things that we... Yeah, definitely. But there's a lot of things we want in life. And where the system is today, I think I'm pretty happy with it. Do we push for the system to keep improving via software updates? Yes. But to me, this is the path that I think is the most promising to get to true driverless. And I think that's really exciting. Like, at the end of the day, we all want to save lives. We all want this convenience. We may disagree about whether, it's going to work or not, or what the right approach is. Do you need lasers or not? But that is what is exciting to me. Now, we're like almost at an hour here.
Yeah.
Do you want to close us off by saying, a message to, angry Tesla people who are mad at you, or in general kind of about autonomy, whatever you want to say to close us off?
That's probably smart. So to the Tesla people, because I get, I get plenty of guff from Tesla people, and that's okay. I'm doing this publicly. That's just part of the deal. I'm going to get some guff. I had a Twitter. I posted a Twitter where I did like a doodle of a French fry box, a little French fry with a face, the animated thing, and I had a Tesla guy come in there to start bitching about Tesla stuff. So sometimes it doesn't even have anything to do with Tesla whatsoever. And I guess I want to say that's fine. If you guys want to be angry about it, that's your business. I'm going to have opinions about Tesla. And they're not always going to be opinions you'll like, and that's how the world works. And I'm sorry for that, but I'll say shitty things about all kinds of other car companies as well. If you really want to see me lay into car companies, you should Google my name and like Rolls-Royce and Bentley, because I love to give them shit because they're so behind mine. But yeah, so but my fundamental reason I do this is because I want to see. I have the same goals as you. I think Omar, you and I don't have our end vision is not that different really. We have different angles at how we're going to get there, but fundamentally, I would love it if less people died in cars. I would love it if people who couldn't drive for health or age reasons had the ability to get places. I love what they do. And when I wrote my book, and half of it was about all the potential interesting things we can do when we have autonomy. I'm not a Luddite. I drive old, ridiculous cars, but I don't think everybody has to. And I'm going to keep on doing it. You guys can keep on giving me shit. And this is the kind of back and forth we're going to have. And look, Omar, I have to thank you so much for having a civil, thoughtful conversation about this stuff, because I know that hasn't always been the case with the interaction between our two. But I think you were incredibly civil, and I appreciate your having me on.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you coming on, Jason. And I mean, I think this is really important. At the end of the day, like, this is a public issue. Like you alluded to, hey, I didn't consent to this beta test. This is something that's a public issue that we're all going to be subjected to.
Yeah.
And, I think we all have a voice in this conversation, whether, no matter what our level of, how informed we are or whatever. I mean, to me, it was a little bit surprising because, you had, you actually wrote a book about autonomy, didn't you?
I did. I have it right. It's here somewhere. Oh, wait, here it is. Yes. And by the way, so last time I was on with Warren, right afterwards, I got a lot of really shitty Amazon reviews from people who didn't buy the book. Don't do that. That's not cool. If you're going to say shitty things, read the damn book, even if you take it from a library or shoplift it. But yeah, Robot Take the Wheel. And this is not an anti-Tesla book. It's just me thinking about all the interesting things about autonomy. That's it.
Yeah. And, so I was just kind of surprised, with someone who's written a book about autonomy, to see your art. And I get that, you were kind of trying to be funny and react to Tesla AI Day and all that stuff. But yeah, exactly. But, to me, there's so much value. This is, I think, to me, one of the most important software projects going on in the world. And I really, really enjoy using it. Like, I love it. You said, what's the point? I could go on for an hour about what's so great about it. But, but I think, talking to you a little bit more, I think we're a little bit closer on this than we think. And, we'll continue the conversation as this progresses towards, driverless and beyond.
Again, this affects all of us. And now this everything's still in its infancy. If there are ways we think we would like to see it implemented, now's the time to make voices heard. Mine, yours, everybody's. This affects us all. And, I think conversations are important. And I think not resorting to...
Yeah.
And I know it's hard. And I know the way the internet is set up does not mean, that does not make that easy. But I'm glad we tried. Yeah,
let's all, be kind to each other. We may have different opinions, but let's all keep it in good fun. And with that, I'll end this discussion. We'll have a better quality of this on YouTube. I know some of it didn't come and some of it was bad quality. I can see some of the comments. But there will be a higher quality of the full talk uploaded for people who want to watch the whole thing. Thank you all, everybody, for joining us.
Are they brutal?
No, it doesn't seem too bad. Anyway, thanks again for joining us, Jason. Take care.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all later.
Have fun.